I'll just throw it on the floor here. The wide open question. What is the historic alliance? What is this, Nicole?
Well, it remains to be seen because, I think it was vague by design because it's very early in the process. If you think about how recent it was that Texas and Oklahoma bolted and left the Big 12, it's been about a month and everyone has felt a lot of pressure to respond and to figure out something to do. So this is more about publicly drawing a line in the sand and saying these are the things we are going to fight for in terms of playoff expansion and the future of the NCAA model. And also we do want to schedule each other for football reasons, get into new markets, new recruiting areas. We haven't figured that out yet because that's the most complicated part. But we're drawing a line in the sand here, and the SEC is on the other side of that line.
Well, look, I'm all for trying to figure out how to solve the Rubik's Cube of gender equity, social justice, diversity, while also having a strong academic experience and work on the mental and physical health, safety, and wellness and support of student athletes. I just gave you 6 bullet points that they put in their press release before getting to postseason championships and future formats. What a great burying the bullet point that one was in this press release. In all seriousness, no, when you said it, did they go big to try and make something look like something where you're still trying to figure out how to make sure Clemson and Ohio State don't bolt for the SEC too? That's the way and USC. Like, that's the way I took this, Nicole. You tell me if I'm being paranoid as a Michigan guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm a fellow Michigan Daily alum as well, by the way. I wanted to mention that.
I knew I followed you and liked your work for a reason, Nicole.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely. For those 3 conferences, you've got to make sure that you're keeping your crown jewels because we just saw what happened to the Big 12, losing their 2 anchor schools. So that's the number one priority. And when you would talk to anyone in all 3 of these leagues over the last few weeks, they would bring that up. I mean, especially in the Pac-12, they're saying you got to make sure USC is happy and involved in the decisions and that we're doing what's best for USC. And it's the same in all of those leagues because you can't afford to lose those anchor schools and the value that they bring. Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner, has said, to the Texas State Senate that their value goes down by half by losing Texas and Oklahoma. That is a massive deal. And I think that people are concerned. You mentioned like a Premier League, like a Super League thing. I mean, I think people were worried when the SEC goes and grabs Oklahoma and Texas that they're going to continue to keep grabbing and that they will eventually have a Super League and that it will be more like a minor league system to the NFL. So that's part of the reason there was this pressure to respond in some way. And it's important to note with these 3 conferences, again, it's a vague promise of working together. Alignment, those types of things. These are all new commissioners. So it's not like one person. It's not like Jim Delaney and Mike Slive who could just go head to head on this stuff. But there is a reason that there's strength in numbers here because of the newness of the commissioners to these roles that are very influential and can be very powerful in college sports.
So Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what's the next step? Like what? I actually put a pin in that one. Where's the Big 12? Did they not reach out to them? Best you can say and tell?
Yeah, the Big 12 was not part of this. And if you talk to people in that league, it is people are not happy about that because, it's certainly an indictment of the value of the teams in that league and the instability that everyone else perceives that they were not part of it. And, there were a lot of pointed questions about that because you had these 3 commissioners saying that it's important for college sports to have a strong Big 12 and that they're hoping this provides stability, which will help leagues like the Big 12. But what would have really helped them? Including them in an alliance.
Yes.
And so I mean, there's a lot of concerns with people in that league and a lot of people who are unhappy with leadership and inclusion and feeling like they're being left out of stuff and finding this stuff out really late, to be blindsided by the Oklahoma and Texas news, and then to kind of be blindsided by this news of an alliance and these 3 commissioners working very closely together. Things are not great in Big 12 world right now. And we'll have to see if those 8 remaining schools stay together. How long can they keep Oklahoma and Texas in the league and providing value to that conference. All of that remains to be seen, but that's kind of where everyone's focus shifts next.
So it's interesting. Let's leave the Big 12 out, right, Nicole? Except how many of the 41 member schools of the Historic Alliance would ditch their coach for Matt Campbell if they could, like right now, right? Like 90% of them? Seriously,
well,
you know?
I mean, that's what's so interesting. I mean, Iowa State's coming off their best season ever. And there's Kansas basketball in this group of schools.
Yep.
And Baylor just won the national championship. And those things aren't valuable enough because those schools just don't bring, like in the Big Ten, are they bringing $55 million a year's worth of value? Like, can you afford to add it and slice the pie another way? And that's where it comes down to. So it's wild that there's so many valuable pieces and things that matter to us as sports fans and administrators and everyone around college sports. But yet that's probably not going to be enough for a league, one of those other power leagues to add someone like that.
Wouldn't it be great if Iowa State goes on that run, though, right, and just blows it all up? That gets us that they could not be denied a spot in the current construct of college football playoffs because they are so, their record is pristine. They don't have any losses, and right, like, wouldn't that be just a way for them to crash the party to do something like that this year?
Yeah. And they could. I mean, they're absolutely going to be in the mix. I mean, it's just they just got to get through Oklahoma, but one of those schools is going to the playoffs. So, I mean, I'm really high on Iowa State, but it would be really telling. And it gets at all of these issues that end up making decisions in college sports about money and markets and value and all these things. Instead of like, what is a great program that is really has a strong identity, means a lot to its college town. Has built its way up, kept its coach, like all these things that we theoretically love about college sports, don't come into play in conference realignment in the way that, theoretically in an ideal world that they should.
And, and just one last thing on this part of our conversation, Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show, is that at some point, though, basketball is going to be a commodity that is valuable to any super league that creates it, itself, right? Because at some point, the way that it's been described to me by a lead pipe wielding sports executive who remains nameless, this person told me that the ultimate is to create a super league, not just for the football. Once you get that handled, now you go after the NCAA tournament and do your own tournament and turn the current tournament into an NIT by inviting also the Cinderellas to the dance based on how they choose. They want them in as an at-large bid to their Super League. And so at some point, the Kansas, Baylor programs will be valuable, but just, I guess, not right now is the way it looks like.
Well, that's the interesting piece about all of this, because if you think back, 6-7 years ago when the idea of a power conference started, that was because they got autonomy in legislative issues in the NCAA governance structure. It was because they threatened to break away and because everyone values that basketball tournament and the fact that you have to have the Davids to the Goliaths to make it as valuable as it is. And there's just so much money at stake, right? So that kept everyone under the same umbrella. So every time this type of, idea gets floated, that's really what it comes down to. Is there still enough value of keeping everyone under the same umbrella and having those upsets and having those automatic qualifiers from, those one bid leagues and the Mercers of the world? Or are we eventually going to outgrow that and that people are just going to, the conferences that make the most money are going to just invest in the sports that make the most money, right? Like that's where I think when you think about college sports being at an inflection point right now and then kind of over the next 5-10 years, like that's kind of one of the macro questions that's going to need to be answered.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.